I tell people all the time that this podcast, especially when Jason was our co-host, was an MBA for me, an alternative MBA. And he used to say something on the podcast often. He was like, if I was to start a business, right, I would get an exceptionally large total addressable market because that gives me a chance at getting a percentage of that business, which could be massive, right? Now, I think advisors that niche down actually are beating the drum, and it's a small, like a minority of the total population that really needs that help, right? So when I hear people doing ideas like yours, like we're gonna help you give this money away, they typically build really tremendously large businesses because people are looking for that exact service. Welcome back to another episode of The Advisor Journey. I'm your co-host, Desarte Yarnway, moonlighting as Will Steiner with the mustache. And we have a special guest here today, Sherman. Aaron, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Desarte, I've been listening to you for years, since I first started looking at Altruist, and so it's amazing to be here in person with the famous voice.
Oh, wow. Famous is a stretch, but I'll take it for today. Aaron, for the advisors that are watching the podcast today, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm president of Odyssey Group Wealth Advisors. We are an independent RIA. We serve high net worth individuals and families. We focus a lot of our work on legacy planning and intentional philanthropy. We manage roughly $380 million. We just made the switch to Altruist this summer. We just registered our own RIA, having moved from Commonwealth.
You have had an extensive history and journey in this space. Talk to us about that, because I know a lot of advisors are starting from different points. And as I was trying to do my sort of background and research about this, I was like, this is so interesting. Your start to running your business, to choosing your niche, and now going fully independent after the Commonwealth transition. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that journey? Yeah,
so a lot of my growth over time in this space specifically has been transforming from, the sort of more old school sole practitioner mindset to an enterprise firm. So we are sort of operate as a small enterprise. We pursue, I'd say, slow, intentional growth. We're not one of these firms that's running crazy numbers on YouTube, that's doing ongoing seminars, that's bringing in 30 clients a month. We're very intentional with the way we grow. A lot of our growth is focused on helping people actually give away their money. So we have quite a few clients where we do in-depth, intentional philanthropic planning, helping them to look at the assets they've built, understand that they have financial security, and to start to understand what can this wealth do for others. So that's been a really important area for us to focus on. We also have another growth driver of ours is we have a good relationship with a shared family office where they have their clients, we have our clients, and we manage to different strength points. So we receive quite a few referrals from them. Otherwise, we just kind of grow slowly and organically, and that's the recipe that works for us. I think that when you listen to this podcast and other podcasts where advisors are talking about their secret sauce, their recipe, I think it often feels like there can be the intention, the desire to sort of replicate, like, oh, I got to follow that guy's YouTube strategy, right? Because he's just crushing it. I think realistically, we all just have to find our own recipe that works for us, and we found what works.
Absolutely. I want to dig into that, right? Because I feel like it's so important, and a reminder to a lot of the advisors that might be watching today, like, it's not just about going fast, it's about going the right way, right? And you have to choose your right way. So kind of get us inside your mind. What was the impetus or the reason for going slow and doing it your way?
I always have my mind on what is the future of what we're building. Right. I personally just don't have any interest in having a firm with 60 employees and 30 advisors and $10 billion in assets. I completely understand why some people are going after that, right? And they do a great job of it. But I don't really want to be in a spot where I lose that connection with my clients. And that inherently does limit growth, right? It's like, there's only so many people I can serve directly and my partner can serve directly. So we do want to move slowly with it. We want to make sure that any change that we make, that the client relationship stays at the center of it. So I think that positioning ourselves, transferring to Altruist recently, that's something that I think can open up some opportunities for growth for us. but it's not going to double our growth, right? We're not going to be in a spot where we're taking on a new client every week. That's just not our model.
You know, I hear a couple of things that I think advisors need to really hold on to. The first thing is like knowing what type of business you want to build.
Yes.
There are going to be advisors that want to grow fast, want to be $1 billion firm, want to get to SEC registration as fast as possible, and that might not be the business for you. It seems to me like you had a clear idea on how you wanted to stay connected to your clients, and Jason talks about this often, and the type of business you want to build. So at the beginning or at the onset, did you know you want to build a slow-growing, highly connected practice with your clients? Because I think advisors need to hear that. We have a lot of people breaking away, a lot of people starting their firms, and oftentimes they come out and they're lost for a few years. And I think that's the most important part, is like knowing exactly what you want to build. Well,
I think I'm glad you asked that question, because no, I did not know that. I think, I don't know, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, do you want to be a $10 billion firm? I'd say, yeah, let's go, let's do it. I think that there was a pretty significant period where it was like I was hearing a lot about the way that people do their long-term strategic planning, and I'd see these people that have a specific North Star that they're driving toward, and it took a while to kind of figure out what that is for us. I think for a long time I held the belief, which I still kind of hold this belief, that if you don't know exactly where you're going, just do what feels like the right next step, and that will lead you in the right direction, and then things kind of reveal themselves over time. But it's not something that you can always just identify right at the outset.
Absolutely. I think sometimes advisors get caught up with thinking 5 steps ahead when they just have to worry about the next step and making that step the next best step for their practice and what they might imagine in the future. I want to talk about just your niche, right? You said you help people give money away, and that's not a common practice. What is the significance, and does that help growth as you are really helping people to do something that they might struggle to do otherwise?
Yeah, I love the conversation around intentional philanthropy. I think a lot of advisors would look at that and say, that's a terrible business strategy to help your clients give money away. And I understand that, but realistically, I think, from a business perspective, the kind of key client archetype that we often are having these conversations with are, you think of a client who is 70 years old. They've been retired for a few years. They might have some income coming to them. They're probably taking some money out of their portfolio. And partly because of the conservative planning we've done, and partly because of how crazy good markets have been in recent years, they're seeing that their portfolios are still growing, right? And so their financial security is all but guaranteed. And so often with advisors, that's the end of the conversation. Great, you're secure, you're in a good position, we did our jobs, pats on the back, let's call it a day. But then it's like you kind of have to follow that to its logical conclusion. Like, okay, so your money keeps growing, you're able to live the life you want without thinking about money, which is great. Your estate plan has, the money going to the kids upon your death, so do you want your kids to inherit $5 million when you die? Some people say yes, and that's fine. Other people say no, I want to be a little bit more mindful about it. So the conversations we're having with clients, it goes beyond what is the security you need, what is the fear you need to have of wealth and not having enough of it, and it shifts more toward what can you accomplish with this? And so it gets people in this mind frame of seeing the impact their wealth can have for themselves and for the family and for the world around them. Because sometimes this conversation does not necessarily drive people toward giving vast sums of money away. Sometimes the outcome is we might be doing some philanthropic giving, but more importantly, now my kids, who are adults, are part of the conversation with me, right? Whereas in the old model, they would have found out, when I died or when I needed a financial power of attorney, what my actual assets were, what my financial picture looked like. So it's really fostering that intimacy, that family connection in a way that I think is hard to do without putting the big picture questions in front of them.
How has that helped growth? Because there are investors and clients that are specifically looking for someone to say, hey, I want to give this away. I mean, we've all heard of die with zero, right?
Yeah.
I think that if you're one of the few advisors that has that mind frame of giving, right, you kind of stand out in the crowd. So how has that helped the firm growth, even though you plan on doing that in a connected and intentional way?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in the business case for this model as well. In that, that concept of die with zero. Actually, I had read that book after a client gave that to me. That is one of those things that's out there conceptually, but still, no matter how much we plan to give money away, we're still going to plan conservatively, right? We don't ever want to threaten financial security, right? So that's the first thing. These clients are not really seeing their assets decline in a meaningful way. Secondly, as what I feel like are the only ones in our area who are really doing this in an intentional way, people come to us. We have new clients who want to come to us for philanthropic planning because they know that we're not just going to talk to them about the tax attributes of a donor advised fund. We're going to talk about what impact do you want to have on the world? What does your wealth mean to you? What do you want it to mean to others, right? So it brings clients to us. And third, it expands the conversation to multiple generations. So we're having these conversations not just with our clients, but we're talking with them about how to involve their kids, even their grandkids in some cases, in their philanthropy. So it brings the entire family relationship to us, or at least it puts us in the center of that dynamic of trying to coordinate, all right, what does this wealth mean for the family? And it really kind of treats it as a family asset, and thus it's a family relationship.
Yeah, I tell people all the time that this podcast, especially when Jason was our co-host, was an MBA for me, an alternative MBA. And he used to say something on the podcast often. He was like, if I was to start a business, right, I would get an exceptionally large total addressable market because that gives me a chance at getting a percentage of that business, which could be massive, right? Now, I think advisors that niche down actually are beating the drum, and it's a small, like a minority of the total population that really needs that help, right? So when I hear people doing ideas like yours, like we're gonna help you give this money away, they typically build really tremendously large businesses because people are looking for that exact service, right? So instead of going on YouTube and maybe beating the drum or using socials, you're doing word of mouth marketing, you're connecting with centers of influence, right? That also have that need for their clients, and you end up growing pretty organically, as you mentioned.
That was one of those things that early on in the business I was hearing all the time. You have to find your niche. You have to find your niche. And I was like, you know what? I like working with nice people who are wealthy, and it's like that was our niche, and it was great. I mean, we had really good relationships, and I understood theoretically what having a niche can do for your business. I didn't have an authentic one that I really felt pulled to, right? And anytime I would talk to anybody who was trying to help me with marketing, that's what they wanted to, who do you want to reach? And I said, nice rich people, right? Eventually we looked at our business, we realized that just because of the area we're in, a lot of our clients were physicians. So we're like, okay, maybe physicians are a good niche. But that wasn't because we uniquely serve them in a special way. It's just that's kind of where our book was. It wasn't until we started just focusing organically on philanthropy that we realized, oh, this can be a really specific market for us to address. It was like the business case kind of followed our own intent and our own interest in pursuing this.
What was the light bulb there? Like, because I think there had to be a switch. Like, take us through that moment when you were like, there could be an interesting business case. Was it a client? Was it a referral? Talk to us about that.
The real impetus for it was that we kept having clients come to us and say, you know, I got the mailer for this organization, how much should I give? Or, you know, my friend is on this board and wanted to talk to me about this capital campaign. Should I donate or not? Or the one that always bothers me the most is my accountant says I should give away $15,000 this year, right? Those were all really just reactive statements, right? That giving either because they felt pressured to, because there was an obligation to, or even worse, giving just because of the taxes. Right, so we just realized that there wasn't really anywhere to anchor that conversation. Our message to them was always, well, give what you want, right, and then let the rest follow. You know, let the tax benefits follow. You know, regardless of what your relationships are with friends or whatever the case may be. But we realized that advice doesn't really do anything for someone. It's like, oh, just do what you want. Like they're coming to us for actionable advice. You know, what they can actually do something with. So that's where we developed this framework for intentional philanthropy, a way to really think about this and guide our clients through it. Over time, it became very clear that this was a real specific need in the market that, you know, I think to me what the real light bulb moment was when I was looking for resources to help with this, and there were none. Yeah. I mean, there's, you know, you can go to any kind of, you know, philanthropic foundation and find information about the work that they do and why. You can go to a provider of donor advised funds, and they'll tell you all about the tax benefits and different legal structures. There were really few resources out there about here's how to come up with you individually as a person, here's how to come up with a philanthropic plan, a real strategy that's going to help you make your wealth a force for good. And that kind of struck a nerve with us. That there's nobody doing this.
It's a clear wedge there, right? And again, it's probably a very small group of people in the grand scheme of things that want to have this type of service, but they're the ones that are going to tell a friend. They're the ones that are going to connect you with their CPAs. It's like this ripple effect of pieces and actions that come after saying, I'm going to work with you for this specific reason. How does a center of influence work into that? Because I think that they might have a trusted advisor or source that handles their affairs. How did you get plugged in there?
Working in the philanthropic world the way we do, our centers of influence, they kind of expand and they become less traditional, right? It's not, we have good relationships with attorneys and accountants who know that we kind of specialize in this type of work, and that helps. But for example, just the other day we did we're doing an educational series at a local retirement community for their foundation, right? And this was somebody who, the head of the foundation started a relationship with us after we did a session for development directors, right? The session was specifically, here are the conversations that we are having with our clients who are your donors, right? And so that's how they came to us, through a strictly educational seminar. We had no idea where we were going with it. There was no business case for it. It was just we realized, okay, our clients, when they go to these organizations, the people they're talking to don't always speak the same language, right? So we want to line them up. So those kinds of people are now a center of influence for us, right? These are people who want us to come to talk to their donors or people who are parts of their organization about the work that we do. And it's really easy for us to say yes without thinking too much about whether or not there's a business case for it, because it's the stuff that we really care about. And sometimes the business does follow, and in other cases not, but it always moves us forward a little bit. And it puts us in touch with new people who hear about what we're doing and who need those services.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm sitting here in admiration because you have this knack for this intuition for saying hey, this is needed, right?
Right.
So you saw issue with the centers of influence or the first introduction to your firm, and you're like, hey, why don't we educate these people?
Right.
And that in turn could help us or be a two-way street for our clients. And I really admire that. I want to ask you a question about material impact that was made on your business from niching down. So after saying, hey, there's something here, taking the step to go in that direction and focus on intentional giving, what did that do to the business? How did you begin to grow? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I feel like I don't have a great answer for this, and I'm realizing, it's like as you're asking the question, I'm realizing we should measure the impact of this more directly, so thank you for that.
There's that intuition again, right?
Right, absolutely. No, it's always been, we're going to follow this path and it's going to work out well, and it has. So it has helped us grow. It has brought in clients. It has brought in new client assets from existing clients. To me, the way I measure the impact is just in the relationships that we have with our clients. They are unquestionably deeper than they would otherwise be if we hadn't been talking to them about their philanthropy, about making their wealth a force for good. It's like I heard an advisor once say that they measure their impact by how many clients cry in their office, right? So it's like you have more of those conversations that are truly meaningful. But clearly I need to go back and create a spreadsheet and actually measure the impact that we have. So thanks for that.
That would be nice, but unquestionably deeper is a heavy term, right? What about your process allows those connections to be unquestionably deeper, right? Because I think that all advisors want to work with people that they like to work with, but I don't think a lot of advisors have deep relationships with their clients, right? So talk to me about that. What are you doing to build that connection with your clients? I
think it's a matter of the things that we're not scared to talk about, right? We'll talk about a client's estate plan and what their intent is with leaving more to one person than another, right? We'll talk about how do you feel like your child will do when they inherit this sum of money, and is that going to be good for them, or is it going to be not good, or are you unsure, and do we need to further this conversation? So we're pushing our clients to do things that I think most advisors would not be comfortable with, right? I have several examples I can think of clients where it's like we've talked through philanthropy, and we don't ever pressure people into philanthropy if that's not an interest of theirs, but they're just not sure where they go, and I say, okay, go meet with this person, decide if you want to donate a certain amount this year, and kind of just moving that forward, not in a way that's against their will, but just in a way to actually make them take some action, right? And similarly with bringing family into the conversation, right? Sometimes we'll be talking about an issue, and it'll come to a point where we say, bring your kids in on this, right? You don't have to open up the books and tell them all the money you have and everything you're doing and give them a vote on everything, but let's have a conversation about this. Give them a voice, help them understand what's going on, and make this a process that can have an impact for generations. It's a way both to keep people in the loop and also propel your values onto the next generation.
It seems like you're not afraid to go there.
No, we're not. And I think, we have amazing clients who appreciate us going there. I mean, we get met with skepticism sometimes, and that's fine. But the clients who I think get the most out of us are the ones who are accepting of that and who say, yes, I'm here for that. I want to be pushed.
Amazing. Let's talk about this recent transition you had, right? So you're new to the Altruist family. Thank you for being here, by the way. We really appreciate you.
Been a pleasure so far.
Lots of transitions in the industry, but the most recent with Commonwealth. So talk to us about that decision-making process that you had from maybe looking through various custodians and then finally making your decision to work with Altruist.
Commonwealth was the firm I was with when I got into the industry. I've always loved them, right? They have a great team that's built it, an amazing network of advisors. It was, without question, the right place to be when I was starting in this business, when I was growing. I learned so much from my network of advisors there, from their practice management offerings about how to build a real business in this industry. I had long, our business has always been pretty much entirely advisory, right? There are a lot of advisors like me in the independent broker-dealer space that are essentially operating as RIAs, but it's just we're in that ecosystem, right? So we have that layer of compliance above us. We are not, we're a little bit captive, right? So for several years, I've been looking at the idea of going RIA and evaluating different custodians. My brother-in-law, Matt Fox, he was one of the early adopters of Altruist, he introduced me to Altruist initially.
Thanks, Matt.
And so several years ago, I opened up my first account with him just because I wanted to see what is the client experience like here. And over the years, Altruist was developing in a lot of ways. We were very excited about it. Pretty early on, as we were evaluating options for going RIA, we had a pretty clear idea, okay, Altruist is it. There was a long period where we didn't quite feel like they had developed to the point where they were really ready for a firm like ours. And also at the same time, we had to ask ourselves, why are we doing this? Because going from an independent BD, from any BD or wirehouse for that matter, to RIA is enormously disruptive, right? It is like just completely pulling the rug out from what we're doing and building our business from scratch. Now, all our clients come with us, right? And we retained all of our clients through the process. But it's every single process, every system we've used, absolutely every internal procedure that our operations depend on has changed overnight. So we didn't really want that disruption. Especially because as I thought about it, it was like, part of the impetus is that we just weren't really using a lot of Commonwealth's resources, right? They have practice management, advanced planning, investment research, retirement plan consulting, all these things that we really didn't use them for what they provided. So it made sense for us to move away. It was just hard to justify the disruption. So it was something that was kind of always in our heads as a someday proposition. In the spring, when it was announced that Commonwealth was being acquired by LPL, that was sort of just an overnight, immediate decision for us. Yeah. It was the kick in the pants that we needed, so to speak. It was, we did our due diligence pretty quickly, and we knew that we weren't going to, if we were going to put our clients through any kind of transition, it was going to be to go RIA. It was not going to be to go to LPL.
Yeah, I want to, there's so much to dig into there. All right, so I wanted to start from the beginning. You said we were held captive in a way. Like, what does that mean? Because there are other advisors like you that are still there that might be on the line. Like, tell them about the difference between the RIA, now that you're on the other side,
right,
versus being in sort of that ecosystem.
Maybe being held captive was an exaggeration on my part. It is definitely an ecosystem, right? So I think Commonwealth was probably about the best there was in terms of enabling advisors to run their practice independently, right? So we could pretty much make the decisions that we wanted to make, and Commonwealth generally didn't interfere. They supported us. They made sure that, if we wanted a certain type of software to use, that there were going to be plenty of options to choose from. So it didn't necessarily feel constricting. I would say the difference really showed itself after we left, right? When we realized, for compliance purposes, we don't have to jump through all these hoops to satisfy some other entity that we're doing things the right way. We just have to know for ourselves that we're doing things the right way. And obviously, ultimately, we're accountable to the SEC. So we have that in the back of our minds. The pluses of an ecosystem like that are that everything's provided for you, right? You need to do investment proposals, we got investment proposals. You want to run financial projections, we got 3 different softwares that can help you with that. You need a trading system, well, we got the one trading system, and it'll work well. So it's for somebody who doesn't want to put too much thought into what those pieces are and wants something that's kind of prepackaged and built for them, that's great. It can be good for those who really rely heavily on things like practice management expertise, who want somebody who will help them run a 401k plan, things like that. All these things are provided in one place. In the RIA world, none of that is provided for you, right? You need to build that. For us, that's been fantastic because we never really used all those other services. Right. We know exactly what our business is after, and we are building it for those clients. And we don't. It's frankly less difficult to build it ourselves than to use an ecosystem that's providing way more than we'll ever use.
You mentioned something else. You were like, the disruption is something that we thought about, right? And I think a lot of advisors are thinking like, this looks great, but I'm gonna have to move how many households over?
Yeah.
Right? So now that you're on the other side, like how bad was the disruption?
Yeah.
Can you speak to that a little bit?
We are constantly building trust with our clients, right? To me, it's like every meeting, every interaction we have, it's like we're making little deposits into a trust bank. When we go to our clients and say, okay, we're making this big move, we're drawing on that trust, right? And it wasn't a concern that our clients weren't going to come with us. Everybody trusted us, and everybody came along. The biggest challenge was just the administration of it, right? It was, getting all the data up front and making sure that we would have operating systems on the other side. It was building our own tech stack, which had previously been with Commonwealth. It was, after we get clients to open the accounts, making sure they sign their client agreements as well, right? Those kinds of things that just hung out there. And our goal was to, as quickly as possible, get back to a point where we're just having conversations with clients about their wealth and their lives. So there was that, I'd say 2-month period where there was not much of us doing that work, right? It was us keeping the lights on while we were getting all this stuff moved over. So it was definitely a real investment on our part. But once it's done, and we're not doing that again anytime soon. And again, I'll go back to the idea that with this specific case where Commonwealth was being acquired by LPL, there was going to be a transition one way or the other, like it or not. So the question we had to answer for ourselves is, do we want this transition to be to a place that we're not really sure about, or do we want it to be a spot where we know we're going to be for the long term? Yeah, and we're glad you chose Altruist. Likewise.
We're really, really glad that you chose Altruist. I want to ask a question now that you're on the other side. Like, what has been some of the highlights, right? Because, everybody wants to get back to the work that they're doing. Being that you've created your own tech stack, what other pieces of technology are you using to power your firm? Because it's like you're starting from scratch.
Right.
So obviously Altruist is one of those, but what else are you sort of integrating in the platform, and how has that been within your firm's operating procedures? So
Altruist as our custodian, obviously. We implemented Advizon as a third-party tech provider. Initially, one thing that attracted us to Altruist was that we didn't feel like we would need, an Orion, Advizon, Tamarack, or whatever on top of the custodian the way you do with others. The key that led us away from that, though, was that we wanted our historical data. So we needed that to report on. And to give props to Commonwealth, they made it super easy for us to take our historical data and plug it in, which I think is not the case for all BDs. So that's our primary tech stack, and then we use MoneyGuide Pro, Right Capital for planning. We're kind of playing around with a few different things for investment proposals, currently experimenting with nitrogen a bit. But we recently hired a director of planning during this transition. So he's the one who's really kind of pushing us more on the tech front, which if it were up to us, it would mostly just be conversations with clients. But he's showing us, you need some technology tools behind this.
Did you look at any other custodians? I mean,
Yeah.
I think that it's fair to give everyone a fair shake to see
Absolutely.
what your firm needs.
Yep.
I think largely, if you care about the material impact that a custodian will have on your clients, Altruist naturally rises to the top. But like, what was that due diligence process like?
Our due diligence process was years long. Like I said, I opened my first account with Altruist as a client in 2022. And that was kind of when our due diligence really started around going RIA. So we're looking at Altruist. We looked at SEI, which was an interesting offering. That was a more sort of heavy service model. With Commonwealth, we were on NFS, so Fidelity. So we also looked at their institutional side, IWS. My partner who I work with had previously been with Schwab and Pershing, so he had that experience. So we pretty much evaluated all of them. And so we felt very fortunate that when this acquisition was announced of Commonwealth, we had done our homework. Like we were ready for that. We didn't necessarily know that we were preparing for that. But as we told clients, we couldn't have predicted this was going to happen, but we've been planning for it for a long time. So it wasn't more than a week or two until we were pretty definite on what we were doing. And as a result, I think we were probably among the first offices to leave, just because we had already done that process. There are a lot of Commonwealth advisors now I know who are just kind of starting this, a little bit disoriented from that announcement and trying to figure out, okay, what are our next steps? So it put us in a really good position.
Yeah, we had Doug Bodenparth on the podcast recently, and he was talking about his transition from Commonwealth to Altruist, and nothing but good things to say about Commonwealth.
Yep.
So I just want to put that on the podcast now.
They're amazing, and they continue to be great people, and I still wish them the best.
Yeah, great place, but it seems like for the advisor that wants control and the best outcomes for their clients, this is the top choice.
And I've gotten that sense. I was talking with Jason earlier, and I think that seeing what Altruist is building is the pace of change is extraordinary, right? There are certain cases in which I think an established advisory office can look at Altruist and say, oh, there's certain features that you don't have yet that are just table stakes, right? Which is true. None of which have been disruptive to our business. But you see the pace at which things are developing, and it's like, yes, Schwab, Fidelity, they have all these features baked in, but they are not changing at all from one year to the next, right? Whereas Altruist is, going on that kind of trajectory. So it's like, as I said to Jason, like when you look at the way Altruist is developing, it just feels like the other guys have no idea what's coming for them. Yeah. I really believe that. It's just, hands down in a few years, I can't imagine there really being much conversation. Like when you're looking at establishing an RIA, what custodian do you go to? It's, I think it'll be a very easy answer.
Absolutely. We appreciate your trust and your vote of confidence. We don't take that lightly.
It was well earned.
I wanted to ask you a question about just life after the transition. Like, what are your goals, right? Obviously, we want to support you in those goals, but like, what do you hope to do now that you're over and now that you got the keys back, right, and you're past the transition to grow your firm?
So honestly, I hope to never think about custodians ever again, right? I mean, this is one of those things. It's been nonstop on my mind for the last 6 months, right? I think it's been several years that we've had this big picture question hanging over us of, what does the future look like for us? And so much of that was dependent upon, our relationship with Commonwealth, what we're doing with that. There's some possible acquisitions out there in the future. But I just want to get back to our day job. Yeah. I want to be spending time with clients. I want to continue to develop our focus in philanthropy. I'm almost certain that for myself, that looks like continually focusing my time more and more on the philanthropic side, and just serving clients well.
Aaron, I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. And thank you all for listening to another episode of The Advisor Journey. You know where to find us, altruist.com/podcast, and we'll see you again on the next one.
Thanks, Asarte.
Thank you for listening to The Advisor Journey by Altruist. Brokerage-related products and services are provided by Altruist Financial LLC, a member of FINRA/SIPC. Results may vary. Altruist and its affiliates do not provide tax or legal advice.